Welcome, everyone, to the Pick Six podcast, where we discuss the best stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Chang, and joining me as always is my buddy, Rudy Tamarchio. Rudy, Happy New Year. We took a little bit of an extended break. I was on vacation. My kids got sick. I got sick. So took us a little while to get back, but here we are. I'm ready to dive into it. I think today we're going to talk about the Pop-Tarts Bowl. We'll talk a little bit of offseason drama. Is it drama? Is it not drama? What are we to expect going into this offseason? And finally, we will obviously preview the final four matchups in the college football playoffs. But of course, let's get things started with the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Rudy, it was exactly what we thought it was going to be. Sadly, not the result we were expecting, but I think we almost nailed it, almost to the exact score. Both you and I think you and I were both within a variable of maybe like 5 to 10 points. I think I was within like 3 to 5 points. But it was a shootout. It was what it was. What were your thoughts on the Pop-Tarts Bowl?
Uh, I think going into it, I think we both thought meaningless bowl game. Like, great to see Cam Ward play. Great to see some of those offensive players get like one more run at it. Kind
Yep.
of looked at it as like, hey, this is also a final kind of proving ground for Lance Guidry and the defense. Say, can they prepare with like a month to do that? The answer is no.
Yeah.
I don't. I think it was just kind of the season, wrapped up in a microcosm of, the first half was Cam Ward and they were lighting it up offensively, and the defense was not doing anything to really help. And that was kind of like the first half of Miami season. And then, Miami went the direction of Emory Williams because they have to give him a tryout. And I think the thing we really learned about this game, Chris, isn't so much about what was happening on the field. We've learned about Miami as a program, the state of college football, and the college football media after the game, because all of this stupid controversy about, oh, well, Cam Ward quit on his team. Yeah, because players just
Uh,
make decisions in the middle of the game and
not,
all that kind of
yeah.
stuff. Like, I think I think you learned more about what Miami was and what they're looking for and how they're going to attack this offseason based off of that game. So I guess I'll let you go with your comments and we'll go deeper into that, because there's so much like disgust that I have, not so much for the fan base as it is just for so-called experts out there that are saying that
Yeah. The
Cam quit and that
pundits.
it's bad for his draft stock and all this stupidity. So
Oh,
yeah,
no.
I don't think we learned much. Like, win or lose, what, Miami won 11 games? Yeah, but they didn't make the college football playoff, and that's what really the objective is now. Who cares if you win 11 games? The bowl game is meaningless.
Yeah, so let's just get this out of the way. The whole Cam Ward controversy. I don't think there is a controversy. I think anyone who follows college football and is a actual college football fan and has been watching all season understands Cam Ward would never give up on his team. That's not in his DNA. That's not who he is. Not only that, but that would be discrediting Mario Cristobal to think that he just has a loose ship and that he's allowing his players to do whatever he wants. Mario runs a very tight ship. There's nothing going on in the Hecht Sports Facility that he does not know about. I'm telling you, even the rumors of Ruben Bain possibly leaving, you know what I mean? Like, he knows that and he's keeping Ruben and those things, but stick with Cam. Again, for anyone to, I think that was just fodder for people to stoke up a fire and to create a story and a narrative that just wasn't there. Mainly because, and this is the truth. I mean, I was on a cruise over the break and for the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and the funniest thing was I'm on a cruise and I'm hearing, did you know there was a Pop-Tarts Bowl? That was a great game. The Pop-Tarts Bowl. I just kept hearing people talk about the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which is really weird because I was on a cruise full of middle-aged people. But two, because at the end of the day, it's like, was this really the most entertaining game? And when I got back and watched more stuff and got caught up with what everyone was covering in bowl season, it really was. So, you've got a game that's very prolific and people thought it was very entertaining and it was a shootout. Very defense was optional. Well, that's only sexy for so long. What else was sexy? Oh, well, the team that lost that should have won only lost because they didn't play their main quarterback, their starting quarterback. Okay, well, let's create a narrative in that. Okay, well, he quit. Absolutely not. This did not pass the smell test immediately. So, in my personal belief, I think Cam, I think Mario asked, "Hey, um, would you play for us?" And I think Cam was like, "Hey, yeah, I'll play, hopefully like in a limited role, mainly to get the record for most touchdowns, right?" And then I think Mario in general just probably wanted to see Emery play and wanted to see how he would do. And the hope was that, Miami would get out to a big lead in the first half and then let Emory clean up and try and keep, the game at bay. Sadly, the defense did the defensive thing, kept Iowa State in the game. And when the plan had to be executed, which was Cam coming out in the second half, which I might even argue, to be honest with you, if Iowa State didn't play as hard as they did and as close as they did, I think Mario would have pulled Cam even earlier, maybe even after the first quarter. What are your thoughts?
I kind of go a different way. Like if we're gonna pretend like we're in that locker room in that facility going into the game, I'm thinking Cam Ward, just based off of what his comments have been through the preparation, he's saying, "I want to play. Not only do I want to set the record, I want to play. I want to blow
Okay.
these guys out. I want to win." And coach was like, "Hey, let's pump the brakes. We love you here. You did great stuff. Yes, play a half because you know
Mm.
you're going to get 300 yards in a half anyway. Like we know what you can do. We have to worry about the future because all
Yeah.
I'm going to do is find somebody that's not you. Or can I roll with one of the backups that I have because they learned under your tutelage for a year of learning this offensive system, trying to do all the same stuff. So we're going to put you in for a half. And then we're going to roll with our backup because he needs playing time. And we got to, you're off to the NFL for bigger and better things. We have to find what our situation looks like. They're probably like, okay, that's cool. Because here's the thing, imagine it. If they had announced ahead of time, oh, Cam Ward's only going to play for a half. Huh, okay. Iowa State knows everything that they need to worry about now. So there's an element of surprise that's missing out of that. Are
Yeah.
you really going to sell as many tickets? Are people going to say, oh, well, I want to watch Cam Ward? Oh, it's only a first half. All right. Well, I'm not going to do that. Um, are people going to leave at halftime? Like, I think there's so many factors at play that you can't give all of your game plan away in that
Yeah.
regard.
That's
That
true.
it you just can't do that. It's not one, you're not playing to win the game. Two, you're not going to do any favors for your university and for the bowl committee by saying we're going to affect attendance by maybe having our star quarterback play like a half. And you lose any ability of your team executing because who knows? Iowa State could come out and say, okay, cool. We're going to come up with X number of blitz packages for Emory Williams in the second half. And, maybe the offense looks even worse because the running game looked great in that third quarter. And, once the team got behind and Emory had to start throwing, okay, we saw some question marks on that end. But I think it's just all overblown. I think Miami fans are just sour because they wanted to see a win and they went up to Orlando and wasted all that money for nothing to feel like it's another loss and that it all feels worse in the time that it happens. And I
Yeah.
think the stupidity in the media of just saying that this was bad for a team and that they make up this false narrative, like you never see this anywhere else. You
That's
never
true.
see this in other programs, other players. It's never the narrative of they quit on their team. It's looking out for their best interests, for their draft stock. Just this week, Cam became the number one draft quarterback again. What's changed? Nothing.
No,
It's
yeah.
just getting closer to the end of the season, and they're watching these other guys who were supposed to be first round draft picks like Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck, Shador Sanders, and seeing what their performances look like. So this is just like you said, it's all fabricated. It's all just drama to make things look worse than they actually are.
Yeah, I think now that we're kind of talking this through and I hear that perspective of yours, I slightly changed my view on it because I do recall the conversation between Cam and Shador before the Bulls. And he was saying, oh, are you gonna play? He's like, oh, I'm gonna play, and we saw Shador play the whole game. And so I think Cam probably did want to play the whole game, but I do think Mario wanted to see what Emery had in him and wanted to give him a chance. And if I'm being honest, there's this also. I'm not sure if you've heard this tinfoil hat theory because we got to bring the tinfoil hat theories in. Um, there's this tinfoil hat theory that apparently Mario actually already knew what he had with Emery and that he wanted to put him out there for a half, not only to showcase to the team and himself, but to recruits and potential players who could enter the transfer portal saying, hey, this is what we've got. It's obviously not working. It's obviously not as great as Cam Ward or within the same stratosphere. If you're a talent with an arm and want to get, and you have a couple years of eligibility or a year of eligibility, come on in. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts? I mean, I mean,
yeah.
I,
I,
I, I think it's a little tinfoil. I think it's a little fringe, but at the same time, it is also very strategic in the sense that you're like, Okay, well, especially when you're talking about the what was the other quarterback, the quarterback from Washington State that we wanted to get, John
Oh,
Mateer?
Mateer?
Yeah,
Yeah.
John Mateer. Apparently the recruiting in that was very close, closer than a lot of people thought, because everyone pegged him to automatically go to Oklahoma, which is what he did. And I think the deck was stacked in their favor between offensive coordinator and being from the area, growing up as a fan. It made sense. But I think the smoke was so thick for him coming to Miami because I think there was that possibility where I think Mario knew that there was going to be a steep drop off. And the thing is this, I think Mario kind of, not that he's fearing for his job, but Mario understands the way the game is being played right now, right? And it's a game of momentum, and not just in the 60 minutes you're playing on the field, but it's a game of momentum in between each game and into the offseason. And I think he knows when you see that drop off, if he was to not start Emery and let Cam play the whole game. Cam only, and this is again, just imagine you just double this, because I think he would have easily doubled this. He left the game in the halftime, 12 for 19, 190 yards, averaging 10 yards a throw and 3 touchdowns. You double that, that's over 400 yards basically, or about 400 yards, right? 6 touchdowns. That looks great. The problem you get in with that is you then start Emery and you have this expectation going into next year that, okay, maybe there's a drop off, but not that slight of a drop off. We saw there is a steep drop off between Cam and Emery. Again, not sure
Yeah.
what happened. And here's a question I actually want to ask you. Do you think the perception of Emery, because there is this now perception that Emery is not good enough and that he may not be the guy and that we may want to go look in the portal for another guy, even though there's no one really left? Do you think the perception of Emery not being the guy is because of his actual play and what he did? Or do you think that Cam did so well this year that the bar had been raised and now Emery wasn't able to meet that expectation?
I'll so I don't wanna call this a safe answer. I think it's
Mhm.
the right answer, but it's both. Because,
Mm,
yeah, we've never seen a quarterback as prolific as Cam Ward, and what you
right.
saw is a guy who was given a lot of liberty to change plays at the line of scrimmage. You're seeing somebody that makes a hard snap, looks around, looks down the line, looks the coverage, and goes, "Okay, I think I have an idea what this is. I'm going to audible to X, Y, and Z, whether it's a run, a check down, or a different route to exploit a defense." What you saw with Emory Williams was, look, a quarterback performance, a stat line that you haven't seen that was basic in like 2005.
Yeah.
When a guy would only have like 60 or 50 passing yards and a half, that's okay in 2005 when you're running two wide receivers, two tight ends, unbalanced line, a fullback, a running back. Like when you're running I formation pro set offenses, that makes sense because you're handing off the ball 20, 30 times.
Yeah,
Emery did that.
which I think also again, I think the game in itself is like an onion. There are multiple layers to this game that you have to kind of look into. Not only did Iowa State come in ready to play, even though they were down a wide receiver, but you look at the game plan called for Emery. I'm not sure if he was, and this is why I lean to that theory of I think Mario knew what he had, and he kind of wanted to kind of just not throw Emery out there, but be like, okay, like, hey, like, this is what it is. We're not gonna, and by me throw him out there, I mean like, not expose him, but like, hey, let's just keep it 100, right? This is what
Here's your
Emery
tryout.
is. Right, but not even a tryout. I think he knew because when you look at the game plan, the whole third quarter, he basically handed it off.
Yeah.
Very few throws. And if you look at his stat line, it's 5 for 14 for 26 yards, averaging 1.9 yards a throw with one interception. That's absolute. I mean, that's not even a third string quarterback's, numbers. I mean, a third string quarterback doesn't throw 14 times, but I mean, either way, I wonder if not again, he was set up for failure, but if maybe like, hey, like the game plan was we'll be ahead by at least 2 or 3 touchdowns by halftime. You manage the third quarter by just handing it off. We'll get by, we'll kill the clock. And then in the fourth quarter, we'll do some dink and dunk quick passes, get you some confidence, go out in the sunset. Maybe they come back, they within a touchdown or two, we keep it close, we kick the field goal, we're done. Which again, I think everyone's talked about this, and I think you and I both agree. tell me when we got to 59 seconds right after the Iowa State scores, it's our last possession. Tell me you weren't thinking, all right, they're gonna put Cam in for this final drive. Get us within get us within field goal. Yeah, to me, like when I tell you, because I kept seeing Cam with the shoulder pads on, holding on to shoulder pads, ready to go, and he looked ready to go. Like he didn't look like he was checked out of the game at all. He seemed very engaged, was on the sideline, still talking, had headsets on and everything. Um, I won't lie, I had a hope. I was like, you know what, maybe Mario again. I don't know how that move would have been taken, but I was really hoping he would put Cam in on that final
You were on the
drive.
cruise, but I was texting Dono during that saying, "Hey, like even before the last drive, it was like beginning of the fourth quarter. I was like, can we put Cam back in for like one more possession? Like, can we just get one more touchdown that we need because we need more points? Because it's one of
Yeah.
those things where you're a Miami fan now, no lead is safe. You saw it
No.
21-0 at Syracuse with Cam Ward. No lead is safe with that defense. If there was a capable defense, Emory would have won the game for Miami,
Yeah.
but we still would have had the same question marks because the things that we were looking at is Damian Martinez had some excellent effort in terms of running the ball. Even in some formations, it looked like, oh, this is going to get stopped at the line of scrimmage. He's still able to get, 7, 8, 9 yards, breaking some bigger runs of 20, 25 yards. They did a great job. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we're getting an idea of what Miami's offense is going to look like next year. Hope to God you have a defense because you can win that way still in college football. That's
Oh,
what Georgia, that's
absolutely.
what Alabama, that's what
That's what
LSU were
Michigan does.
doing.
Yeah. That's what
Right. So
Michigan does.
Michigan did all last year and
Yeah.
won. They haven't, granted, we don't have as much knowledge of other teams' plays and formations as Michigan did, but we may not have the stallions on defense to make this happen.
Yeah. The game
Um,
shark. We couldn't put the game shark in.
Right. So like there was a point there where we go, okay, if this is what it looks like, it's fine. Because don't get me wrong, I was one of those guys that was saying, look, Emory deserves a chance to see if he's the starter. They played for him last year. This team is very different. I think one thing that we saw going into that final drive of the fourth quarter was offensively, this team kind of checked out as well in terms of like, hey, we don't think we got this right now. So I think
Well,
the
hold on. Let me push back on that really quick.
good, good.
Do you think it was that they gave up, or do you think the fact that they literally were forced to play young and unexperienced players on top of having a backup, technically a backup quarterback in? You know what I mean? Because I thought the same thing at first. Went back, watched the highlights, looked at the personnel that was on the field. And again, we don't have Horton in, you don't have Restrepo in. I mean, you're losing your two biggest offensive weapons essentially. Was a little surprised in the second half they didn't go to Arroyo or bring in McCormick or go to that Loft. Even Loft, they brought Lofton in and they used him, but lean on that a little bit more. Like pull a Penn State. Penn State's when we'll talk about that later in the show. Penn State has this gnarly tight end. But I was kind of there were things that were again.
I was looking
Uh,
at the line. I was just looking at the offensive line in between plays because you see, like when they're getting the play in, they're all looking. I'm looking at where their eyes are. If they're
okay.
looking off, if they're not looking at the quarterback, like if they're just kind of like doing whatever they are, that's what I'm looking at and seeing because you can definitely feel a little bit more dejected if it's like, okay, I've got JoJo Trader, I've got oh my God, who's the other guy that played a little bit? Ray Joseph. Like he had
Mhm.
a few different, younger players in Elijah Lofton. And you're thinking, oh, I don't know if he's going to deliver this pass. But when you're an offensive lineman, your assignment is the defensive lineman in front of you. It's like picking up that blitz. It's just whoever that guy is, because if you're not playing, yeah, maybe Emory gets hit, but you're getting knocked on your butt too. So for me, I'm looking at that and thinking, how are they reacting to this? And it just didn't seem like it had that same umph that it did when Cam was in the game. So it's telling me that there's this understandable drop off that they know of as well. And it's like, if you're going to play for a win, it's going to be on the players. It's not going to be on the fans, not going to be on the coaches. It's them
Oh
wanting to
yeah,
see how
no.
they finish that game. So
Well, I mean, I
that,
also
and then if you
I
combine,
I
sorry, well, one thing that the
go
stat line too, because for me, it was the batted passes. It was watching a guy who's
okay.
6'5", who couldn't deliver the line over. Brock Berlin was like 5'11", so I understand like where his visibility was. And he looked at some of the guys from our days as students, like a Kyle Wright, Kirby Freeman. Like none of them have that height. Emory being kind of on the smaller side, he doesn't look as tall as he does. He's 6'5". So
Yeah.
that's my only knock.
Yeah, I also thought Emery's throws, which was really weird because he broke his non-throwing arm. But his arm strength still also, and his accuracy especially, didn't look like the Emery that beat Clemson, the Emery that kept us in the FSU game. I'm not sure whether it's like rust and like the ability not to practice with the first teamers, or like I said, like again, we had a wide receiver. I didn't even know him, but like Shamar Kirk, didn't even know that guy. You know what I mean? When I tell you, you're literally playing with second and third stringers in this game, which again, silver lining, great talent. They kept us in a game where the other team was literally playing all their starters, which I do want to note really quick, and we could talk about this in a further show. But like, I think the best games in bowl season this year were the games where both teams were playing with almost 90% of their starting lineup. You know, teams that the games that were very uninteresting were the games where they were all playing with backups, like your Duke Old Miss game. Like that would have been a great game, I think, had Malik Murphy been in there and had they had some of their stars there. I really think the transfer portal really needs to be pushed past the offseason, or what I do want to talk about in the offseason, moving the bowls to week one. Get rid of the bowls, move them to week one. Because no one cares in the postseason. And if we're going to keep the transfer portal where it is and kids are going to opt out, I mean, you've got teams that are completely gutted at this point playing. Um, but again, he just looked, talking about Emery Williams, he looked off. He didn't look confident. He didn't look like, hey, like you are the heir apparent. He literally looked like a traditional second string quarterback who probably isn't going to go anywhere. Not to say he can't get it back in the spring and that he won't get it back in the spring and even into fall practices, but just seemed a little off, you know?
I know you want to talk about this later, but I think that's a genius idea because as you're talking, all of the like wheels are turning. I'm doing like the hangover with like the math equations. Yeah, with Zach Galifianakis. Like literally,
Yep.
I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, that actually benefits everybody. And I'm not talking about like I know we're gonna go there, but I'll just leave it at this little carrot. It's don't even think about football programs or athletes or college football divisions. I'm thinking like tourism boards and bowl committees and hospitality. Like
Oh,
we've
I'll
got
go even.
something.
Okay, I don't want to go too deep, but
Yeah.
I want to say this so that I can get it on camera and make sure I make note of it to go deeper later. You could even play the bowls in the summer, right after fall. Like do 2-3 weeks of fall. You know, the NFL has that preseason where like the teams will do like a little like in practice exhibition where it's not like
Yeah.
quite a game, but they practice together. You do
Yeah.
something like that, and you can make some money, get people, get their palate a little wet, a little preseason app for the regular season. I
A
don't know.
little
We're gonna
appy,
go
a
in.
a charcuterie board for your
I'm
football,
just saying, a little sorpresada. You know what I mean?
a froze bowl with some soppressata.
That would be amazing. It would be amazing. But we got to keep it moving. We got to keep it moving. But listen, obviously the defense was the biggest issue for the Pop-Tarts Bowl, but luckily, UM did the right thing. They're going to keep it moving. We're moving into the off season and we finally got the balls, did the right thing and are getting rid of Lance Guidry. Transfer portal's been a little bit of a mess, and this QB DC vacancy right now is all up in the mix. What do you want to talk about first? Do you want to talk about Lance Guidry firing? Do you want to talk about the new defensive coordinator search? Do you want to talk about portal? What do we want to tackle first?
I don't think we need to like beat a dead horse and talk about Lance. Like, look, wish him the best of luck at the next place. I don't know what happened this year. I'm not going to say that this was like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of scenario because like the defensive performances they had last year that looked good were also kind of exceptions to the rule where they're working around injuries and stuff. But
Right.
something that we really haven't had confidence in a Miami defense in several years, not since like Manny Diaz was the defensive coordinator did we really have like more confidence in our defense, a little undersized, maybe a little short on talent, a couple holding calls away from having some better numbers, but like Miami has not been able to play with a lead since well before Cam Ward. It hasn't played with a lead since like De'Aaron King, if not
Yeah,
even
that's true.
earlier than that. So this is something that precedes Lance Guidry, but it was something that you have a little time to fix it. You got what we thought was pretty good talent to make it happen. And there's just, I think the bigger conversation to segue through is to talk about the portal talent that's leaving, what Miami is bringing, and seeing what that looks like for the next piece. Because I think we're going to learn a lot next season about whether some of this talent that's leaving is that a Miami problem where the system didn't really work for the players, or
Right.
are these players going to go somewhere else and perform the same way they did at Miami, or are they going to be like second or third on the depth chart and play behind somebody at another program? Not under the expectations of doing that, but trying out for the position, not making it in camp, and being second or third on the depth chart somewhere else.
Yeah, I think when I look at it, I wonder what happened with Lance because Lance, it's funny, like immediately, like you and I, we both like fire him. He needs to go. He needs to go. And I think the right decision was made. But I was listening to, I think it was his son, or maybe it was a family member of his, and they wrote into a show, and I think maybe it was Dono's show, but they were like, "Hey, here are the stats for Lance. Lance has only one losing season in his entire career. You know what I mean? And then the next season, he completely transformed a team, and two losing seasons. Sorry, excuse me, one in high school or college, and then turned it around and won the state or national championship in like Division 3. And then I think he was at Miami, Ohio. I think is with the other one where he literally had a losing season, but then the next year won with double digit wins. So to me it was a little weird because like I do wonder, was it a kind of portal problem, basically kind of what FSU dealt with on the offensive side, but we dealt with on the defensive side, where we just couldn't get people to click, couldn't get chemistry, couldn't get guys to figure out the system because there were so many different players coming in key positions. Because again, you've got Tyler Bear and Simeon Barrow, you've got Powell, you've got who else came in that was on the defense that started. I can't think, but either way, even just those three guys, right? Let's just use those three guys. You've got an end, an inside lineman, and a safety, who those are crucial pieces, especially when you look at the tandem of the defensive line giving time to the DBs and the safeties. If there's not a chemistry and a link there, things can quickly go sour, and I think we saw that. And so, segueing to the transfer portal, I genuinely now worry with what was it? Harris that went to Georgia. Who went to Georgia?
Jaden Harris, yeah.
Jaden Harris, right? I mean, he got in the portal and was only in there for maybe 2 weeks, if that, not even, because I think he went in like around Christmas, and now he's already at Georgia. What does Georgia see in him that we didn't? Because it's not
Yeah.
like we fought for him.
Yeah, so and that's where I think some of this kind of all ties together. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Jaden Harris at Georgia, because this is becoming kind of a. This is the first defensive version of this, but Miami has kind of been this like transfer, just like how Miami was taking or was trying to take quarterbacks from Washington State.
Right.
Georgia's taken players from Miami over the years, but usually they get our tall wide receivers. They got Lawrence Cager a few years ago.
Yep.
After that, was Colby Young, and now they're getting Jaden Harris, who is defensive back. Primarily played, I think he played more corner, and Miami tried bringing him into a safety position.
Yeah.
And just, it didn't matter where people were playing. They all looked lost with the exception of like OJ Frederick, for
Yeah.
example, of being like guys who just, OJ Frederick and really honestly Zaquan Patterson too were the only two guys that seemed like they kind of knew their assignments. So we'll see what happens with Jaden Harris at Georgia. It can be one of two things. If he goes and balls out there and becomes a starting safety and is like this all SEC talent, okay, it's system and it's playing a position that maybe wasn't for him. Or it could be just a more simpler style of defense. Because I think the difference between Guidry's coaching resume, nobody's going to come to the University of Miami with a bad resume. Nobody's going to be like they struggled, unless your name is Mark D'Onofrio. You're not going to struggle in other places and end up working at a place like the University of Miami, even though it's not the highest paying job that's out there. This might be, and this is my tinfoil hat theory, but maybe this is similar to the way of like Jim Larinaga retiring and some of these other players, some of these other coaches in basketball retiring, saying that the style of coaching is very different. And I think something that at least I'm looking for in a defensive system and a defensive coordinator moving forward is because there's such an inconsistency every year in your roster and who's coming in and out of the transfer portal and how we are going to keep your talent that you retain as freshmen and sophomores. You're
Yeah.
not seeing sophisticated defensive schemes anymore. And I think something that Lance Guidry has hung his hat on and has done really, really well is having some very complicated, more like nuanced style defensive packages and coverage where you need to drop somebody back and show this look and then flip into this. And that's where I think they've had issues because last year Miami struggled with up-tempo offenses. This year they struggled with any tempo offense because they
Yeah.
couldn't line up and make any type of assignment, basic things like setting the edge and just having the right, nucleus of players covering the right people. You should never have a linebacker on a wide receiver or
Yeah.
on a running back that like flares out super far. Like you need to have your matchups properly, and Miami struggled to do that all season long. So I think what they're looking to do is they need somebody, two more things that I think did land Skidry in evaluating talent coming through.
I
Because if
was
the issue was
verbatim
portal,
gonna say the same thing. Yeah, I was
yeah,
gonna
if
say the
the
same thing. I'm like, do you think it was a talent issue though? Because when you talk about setting the edge and when you talk about, even just making adjustments, I don't know if that's necessarily on coaching as much as it is on the actual player. You know what I mean? Like getting to the space you needed to get to, being in the position you need to be into because setting an edge, it's setting an edge, it's pretty elementary, you know what I mean? Like, there's not that much confusion in it and not that much strategy in it. So I begin to wonder now, and I think we're seeing this, which is again another great story for the offseason, is this evaluation in general by the media of talent? Because we're seeing, speaking of transfer portal, we're seeing like Malachi Nelson, who was a five-star quarterback going to his third school. You're seeing Jaden Rashada, who is a five-star quarterback going to his third or fourth school right now. You know what I mean? Like, are we evaluating these kids correctly? It's almost like
well,
the AP poll at the beginning of the season. Like, it's like, do we need to do this? Do we really even need to like give these kids stars as much anymore? Do we want to put as much emphasis on these stars? Because, the old adage was Miami would win their national championships with three stars. They didn't have a bunch of five-star, blue chippers. It was three stars that played up to beyond their potential.
and historically, that's kind of also the setting point of like the downfall of Miami football
Hmm.
is relate. It's more dependency on these like recruiting services and going after five-star talent anywhere they were. Where the Miami, formula has always been getting your best, retaining your best homegrown talent, and then filling your couple of holes that you have and positions with players from other parts of the country that want to be here. So you still get your five-star talent, but like you're picking up an offensive lineman from Texas, you're getting a quarterback from California or Pennsylvania or Texas or somewhere from there, and you're building around that. Maybe you get an offensive lineman from Canada and a guy from Iowa or something like that. Like that's where Miami has always been successful because then the rest of your players, like all of your defensive talent, all of your skill positions stayed in South Florida or in the state of Florida on its own.
Right.
So yeah, that's part of it for sure. I think there's two pieces here. Like outside of evaluating talent, also was bringing your talent with you because you had a guy like Deani Hill who's now in the transfer portal himself.
Yep.
Brought him from Marshall a year later, and that was kind of the excitement of okay, this guy's played in this system before. He knows what's going on, and injuries aside, really didn't see a lot from that. So I think that was kind of this loss of like this vote of no confidence on his end. And then as you were saying about, all these third party services, look, we're a prime example of this. We're two disgruntled Miami fans who've watched enough football to know, like, hey, we've seen what good looks like. Am I
Yeah.
going to tell you that the leveraging of like your force against me by getting lower and making a better hit? Like, no, I didn't play a lick of high school football. My mom didn't want me anywhere near pads, and it's probably a good thing because I'd
I
be,
did.
a vegetable right now, given what we know about how tackling form and everything has changed over the years. But like between Pro Football Focus and how there's like 500 different recruiting services, and one gives this guy a 5-star, this guy gives nothing.
Four-star. Yeah.
There's like four or three guys, like there's like three or four guys out there that know what they're talking about. Guys like, like Larry Bluestein, for example, who's been around this forever and ever, and
Right.
finding like older coaches who still keep themselves together. I think it's something that like fans are going to get all caught up in the fanfare of saying, well, this guy is amazing talent. Like Willie Williams, for example, when Miami picked him up when we were, freshmen, sophomores in school, like
Yep.
this is a 5-star recruit. And the poor thing you realized finding out was super raw talent was, I mean, right here in Miami's
Yeah.
backyard, there was no excuse of saying, well, we've seen every single game. He played at Carroll City. So it was just like, where was the difference? It was just an extra level that like people can look like monsters in high school and it just doesn't carry over to the NFL. Not everyone
Well,
is
it's also
Alan Taylor.
because, like, it also depends on what division you're playing in high school, like, if you're a 1A school and yeah, great, you have 1,000 yards, but if you're playing against wide receivers or DBs who are only, like, 5'8", you know what I mean? What are you gonna do when you play against a 6 foot plus DB? Like, you're probably not gonna be as you're not probably not be making the catches you'll be usually making,
The
and
football version of that little kid clapping next to Zion Williamson, for example. Yeah.
exactly. And it's like the other thing too is we also have to I think there's I think there's like raw potential, right? So you look at like a wide receiver, right? To me, an ideal wide receiver would be somewhere in the ballpark, 6'3", 6'5", 200 pounds. Like you give me a kid who has those measurements, low body fat, because it can go either way with 200 pounds. Okay, and let me see his speed. Okay, he runs a 4.8. Okay, not the fastest, not the quickest, but it's there. Okay, let's coach him up, see how he does. You know what I mean? Because like when you get these stars and you see these kids, I look at some of these like 5 stars and these blue chippers that they're getting, and I'm looking at their measurements, and I'm just like, I'm not sure how well he's gonna do. Yeah, he was great in Iowa, in the Iowa circuit or the high school like area, but like, what's he gonna do when he's playing kids from Georgia? What's he gonna do when he's playing kids from South Florida? Like, those are different things. And even Dion said, like the dogs play in Florida. So it's like where you're
Always have.
from, yeah, and where you are, where you're from. It's like your pool of talent will change. And I think the other thing that people really kind of need to pay attention to is it's like, oh, well, we didn't get the number one wide receiver. Like I would have loved to have gotten, I had to catch myself saying this. I would have loved to have gotten Jeremiah Smith. And God, if Cam Ward would have said in the December transfer portal, I'm coming to Miami and not waited, I think we would have gotten Jeremiah Smith. But then I think about what Cam Ward did, and I'm like, yo, look what Cam Ward did with what he had, right? Yes, it probably would have been better with Jeremiah Smith, but how much better? Okay, that's fine, but we still would have had the same defense. And so you can't sit there and be like, oh, like we only got the third best wide receiver. It doesn't matter. What cornerback did we recruit? What safety did we recruit? Did we get the number 2 safety? Because that's kind of going to be important.
Yeah, you might make the college football playoff with Jeremiah Smith, but you're still losing. Right? You're still losing either your ACC championship game, you're losing your first round playoff, or you get that bye that everyone so badly wanted, and you're losing in that second round, like everyone who had the bye did. So,
Yeah.
in the end of the day, like, yeah, it's cool for talent, and then he's probably going in the portal this year, leaving Miami because we have no defense.
Yeah. And I
So,
mean, let's
yeah,
let's talk about that aspect, right? It's like who has the most talented team? We saw the most expensive and the most talented team in college football go down to a 5-loss team in Ohio State losing to Michigan. And it was pretty one-sided. I would not say the Ohio State Michigan game was close. I would say Michigan definitely outplayed Ohio State. Ohio State definitely pooped the bed. And there you go. Granted, one game. You're right. It's one game. But
then
it's
they got
probably
angry and beat a more expensive roster in Oregon.
exactly, you know what I mean? And so again, I do think always talent will win out. But in the game of football, which is why I love it so much, it really is about who wants it more because you will have teams. And we saw it this year, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, teams that were not to our caliber just want it more. And they got it and they went out and got it. Specifically Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is a phenomenal example of great coaching and players who wanted to show up and show out because that was not a team we should have lost to, at all.
Neither year. Either
Exactly.
year.
But you had extremely good defensive coordinator, and then you had players who just wanted to ball the hell out and prove something. Haynes King with the chip on his shoulder, Singleton with a chip on his shoulder. These are small guys who probably didn't get rated well, which is why again, I'm not sure if the rating system is something we really need to be going by. I think talent evaluation now is even more important as a defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator. And I think again, talking about Lance Guidry, I think you're 100% right to round this out. I think it was his evaluation of the talent, whether it was in the portal, whether it was recruiting, and the guys just weren't good enough.
Evaluation of talent and also just the way college football is going right now, because you have such a turmoil in terms of where your roster looks like, how many players are you bringing and how many players are you losing. You have to run a more simple style of defense.
Hmm.
It's becoming more athletic than ever because they're spreading out the field. You need guys who can just simply cover one on one, who have closing speed and have clean tackling form. That's all you need. And to be honest with you, it's funny because Miami's older defenses under like Randy Shannon, for example, all you have to do is just tweak the formation, because when Randy was defensive coordinator, a 4-3 was standard. You weren't seeing as many wide receivers out there. Now it's more like you're running nickel, but you're still
Yeah.
running a standard base defense, two high safeties. Miami ran two high safeties for what felt like a decade. And look at the defensive stats. We thought we were so delusional back then as Miami fans that we thought if we weren't ranked in the top 15 in total defense, we had a bad defense.
Yeah.
Granted, statistically, I think we were still kind of a top 25 defense for most of the year, but we all can pass the eye test and say this was
Oh,
one of the worst defenses in Miami Hurricane history, just
by
based off of what you needed.
by far,
Yeah.
and it's just compounded when you have one of the best defenses in Miami and best offenses in Miami history. You know, it's just it's sad to say. It is just the way that the cookie crumbles. Where yeah, was the defense the worst defense in college football? Absolutely not. But it looks even worse when your offense is clicking on all cylinders and really pulling you out of every game because your defense wasn't helping you, you know?
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned the one-on-one, which actually makes let's get to the CFP really quick because we got to talk some real football, you know?
Yeah.
You're talking about man on one-on-one, and it's funny because when we talk about defenses, well, let's kick this off with the Orange Bowl with Penn State playing
Notre
Notre
Dame.
Dame. Notre Dame, fun fact, did not know, completely forgot. Not forgot, but like I'm just like it's so because he played tight end. It's I think didn't Al Golden play tight end at Penn
He
State?
did at Penn
Yeah.
State. Yep.
For him to be the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame and for them to be clicking, it's one of those things that just it doesn't make sense in my head, so it never clicks, so I always forget. But it's funny, it's like you watch Notre Dame and all they do is they are a very vanilla defense. It's man on man, and we're gonna see who wins. You know, and there's some trickeration here and there and some scheming here and there. But for the most part, it's a meat and taters defense, and it's done phenomenal. I mean, Northern Illinois aside, I mean, Notre Dame's looked great all year. You know, went to Kyle Field, took care of business with Texas A&M, and again, Northern Illinois aside, every other game afterwards took care of
Yeah.
business.
That was the wake up call for them to say that, look, if you're not taking everybody seriously, that's the
Yep.
game that you're going to lose. And look, they got out physicaled in that game, and they've out physicaled everybody else every game since. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
completely. And you look at this Penn State team, and it's I feel like this is to me this is the closest game in the Final Four. Would you agree, or do you think the Ohio State Texas game will be closer?
I think they'll be close too. I mean, I think in terms of like the margin of victory, I think they'll be better games. But yeah, I think in terms of how these two match up, like there's such a similar style. I mean, I think Penn State has a better offense, but remember, Notre Dame's defense has been pretty good. And
Yeah,
I know Penn State struggled at times to move the ball, even with Drew Aller. He's kind of like his coming out party was against the likes of like SMU. Notre Dame's not SMU. So let's see what happens in that side. But yeah, I think what we've kind of learned though is 12 might be too much. I think if you keep it to like 8, this final 4, this like back to what the college football playoff looked like last year and for the previous 8 to 10 years before that, it feels like you got there with the right talent, with the right levels of teams, the way that they're playing that style of football. It's
right.
just a matter of let's see what happens tonight.
Yeah, I think yeah, 8, maybe 10 might be good. Because I think the Arizona State Texas game was a phenomenal game. So
Yes.
I think Arizona State definitely belonged.
They were conference
SMU,
champion. Of course they
yeah,
deserve to be there. Yeah.
yeah, I think SMU, mm, I love them. how much better we would have fared than them, I don't know. But I think putting us in over SMU would have been better. Again, I'm taking records and things aside. I'm just looking at teams and matchups in general. I think that the top seeded teams were pretty much the teams that should have been in, you know? Um, but I think, like, take for example, I'm not gonna. I know this is kind of contrarian, but I kind of think Ole Miss would have been a great team to be in the playoffs. I think they had a great team. They had a great showing against Duke. Granted, it was a Duke that was pretty much hollowed out from the transfer portal, but I still think that would have been good. I To me, I think you're right. I think the best teams in college football are playing right now. I think the most, I don't know if again best, I'll say the most consistent
Hmm?
teams are in the Final Four. You know?
And teams that got better over the course of the year. Because Penn
Yeah.
State, look, I dogged Penn State all year. I thought they should have lost to USC out there. I think they
Hmm.
got the benefit of a bad call that went their way. I think they looked bad against a few other teams out there too. Like they struggled against what I thought was the bottom of the Big Ten, which they did. Um, I just think, look, repetitions matter. And the fact that every team that had that first round bye lost tells you that college football is not like the NFL, where you can just take off the week, go through walkthroughs, just do some practices, be light. They need those repetitions. They need to stay sharp. And I think that's what they learn. And also, look, having that home first round game, playing in some nasty conditions, has kind of helped them in terms of understanding like how they need to play the game right now. Because it's all, this is where the athleticism kind of goes away. And it's how good is your system and how good are you together on offense? You may not be the most explosive, but if everybody is hitting their marks and executing, you have a better chance of winning the game right now.
Yeah, I mean, you look at both teams. I mean, both teams are not allowing more than 15 points on their defense, and they're scoring over 30. I mean, those to me, those are great stats. And when you look at the same thing with with Texas and Ohio State, it's the same thing. They're both neither team is allowing more than 15 points on their defense on average, and they're both scoring over 33 points. Again, those are those are stats that I think are going to put you in a really good position, but also win you a lot of games. And I think the the two teams in each of these that I think will probably win and give us a Big Ten championship are the two teams that have the most standout players. So you look for me when I look at Penn State Notre Dame, I do think it's going to be a very close game. I think it is almost a toss up, but I think Penn State's tight end, that Tyler Warren kid, phenomenal. I mean, we've been talking about him for the last quarter of the season, especially. But I mean, he's been the de facto like game changer for every game for them, and he
Mhm.
has been a great offense. I think their running back also, you know, Keyshawn Allen he's got over 1,000 yards, and again, Notre Dame isn't that far off either. When you look at the stats, they don't have as good of a tight end, um, but their running back very similar. Their quarterback probably better than Riley Leonard. I mean, Riley
Drew
Leonard is
Aller.
is doing
Yeah,
Drew Aller, yeah. So it's
definitely.
like again, but it's not like Riley Leonard is terrible. I mean, I dogged him after that Northern Illinois game, but I mean, he's shown time and time again that he can get it done and sneaky, sneaky good on his feet. Like doesn't have he's definitely not a Michael Vick, but you get into a 3rd and 2, you got 2 and 4, 2 and 5, very manageable series for him. So, what would you say are the keys for the Notre Dame Penn State game that goes on tonight?
Okay, so keys to the game, I feel like it's going to be Penn State's offense has to win it for them because
Hmm.
I think their defense is playing really well, and I think their defense matches up better against Notre Dame than Notre Dame matches up against them. So, as you mentioned, I think relying a little bit more on that passing game, not throwing the ball all over the place 40, 50 times. That's not Penn State football, but taking advantage of the mismatches when you have them is going to be really key for them. And I think it's just going to be taking advantage of momentum. If they can break off like one or two good runs, I think they know, okay, have to run up tempo and get that passing game involved. I think that's what it's going to be for them to win this game, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I
for
think everything
me,
else 50-50.
I think if Penn State can semi shut down Tyler Tyler Warren. And then on top of that, I think if Penn State can get Abdul Carter, because he's been injured, if he can play well, I think again those are the two for each team. It's how does Notre Dame shut down that tight end Tyler Warren, and I because again, not to say that he is the whole team, but your playmakers are your playmakers, and when you get into this phase of football playoffs, late playoffs, championships, you want to put the ball in your best player's hand. So when you cut that off, the game plan goes out the window. So I think that on the Penn State side, they've got to make sure that Tyler Warren has an outstanding game, that Drew Aller minimal mistakes, because I think this Notre Dame defense will take advantage of that with
Mhm.
turnovers. But I also think on the Notre Dame side, I think if they can keep the momentum and Riley Leonard can stay on his feet, stay clean, and keep Abdul Carter out of the backfield, and they can get that run game going. I think that again, I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame won. Who do you have in the game?
You want me to okay. Well, I had an inside source tell me a little bit about a couple of these games. So
Okay, let's hear
at
them.
least with this one. Um, he just loves what Al Golden has done for the Notre Dame defense. And I don't think that the bias of him being an alumnus of Penn State's going to play too much into his game plan here. We offer him a lot of money to stay at Notre Dame. They've got a great defense at Penn State. I don't think he's going anywhere. But there is one big problem with Notre Dame, and it's not an Al Golden problem, even though he looks like my high school softball coach. It's not a Drew Aller problem. It's not a James Franklin problem. It's a South Florida problem. Every time Notre Dame has played at now Hard Rock Stadium in the past, 10
Oh,
years, they get their asses beat. It was
oof.
Alabama in a national championship game with Manti
Yep.
Te'o and his fake girlfriend in the stands. It happened in 2017 against Miami when they were like number 2 in the country. There's something about that place. This is a different Notre Dame team. It's a different. There's something about that place. There's like a curse on Notre Dame when they come down to South Florida as of late,
Yeah.
or as of the last 30 years, 40 years, that they can't win here. So I think the combination of just Penn State's offense matching up a little bit better,
Hmm.
um, Penn State having a defense that'll be able to probably keep Riley Leonard in check because that quarterback run is such a big part of their offense.
Yeah.
I got Penn State winning this game. And look, it's cold. It's going to be like in the 40s. It'll feel like summer for them up there in South Bend after what they played in. Same
Right.
thing with Penn State. They both had some really, really bitter cold games. I'm thinking like, you want me to go like full on score prediction?
Sure. Why not? Let's do it.
I'm thinking like 31-24 Penn State.
Oh, okay. I have Penn State as well, just because I think they have again for me, and it's kind of like giving away the next prediction for the next game. I think the team with the weapons and the clear cut weapons, not just, oh, they've got a great defense. Okay, well, who's on their defense, right? I think teams with stars and weapons usually almost win out all the time. And there's just something about Penn State. They're clicking. They're doing everything they're supposed to do. Again, I think their only loss, no, they have two losses. They lost to Ohio State, and who else did they lose to?
Penn State?
Oh, they lost to
Um,
Oregon. That's right. They lost to
yes.
Oregon in the championship. So
Yep.
look at both of their losses, right? Both of their losses were to the two teams that most people were predicting to win the national championship. So they come second there. Okay, well, I definitely don't think Notre Dame would be favored in either of those games, right? So to me, it's just like, okay, I test aside Penn State, but then Penn State, the weapons. Again, I think Tyler Warren is just playing lights out. He's again, he could be Gronk 2.0 or who was the guy from Georgia? What was his
Oh, you're
name?
talking about Brock Bowers?
Bowers, Brock Bowers 2.0. You know what I mean? I mean, this guy he's almost a wide receiver. I mean, how many tight ends do you know have 1,100 yards? Like, that's
Yeah.
insanity, right? And then again, this sounds stupid because they don't play each other, but it is a valid statement to make. The team with the better quarterback usually wins, and I think Drew Aller's a better quarterback than Riley Leonard. So I'm picking Penn
100%.
State. I think at a little bit lower of a game because I think both defenses will be out for blood today. And again, even if Abdul Carter doesn't even play to to the half of his potential. I still think the way that Penn State took care of Boise State without him, I think they're good. Not to say that Boise State and Notre Dame are comparable, but you see a defense that didn't regress really with their star missing. So I'm going to say it's either a 23-17, 23-21 game.
Mhm.
Lower defensive battle. I think it's going to be because I see the Ohio State Penn State game again, very much like this. I always consider Notre Dame basically a Big Ten team, so I think it'll go Big Ten. Moving over
Yeah.
to the Cotton Bowl, we've got Texas, Ohio State, 5-point spread. It was I think 6.5 at one point in favor of Ohio State. What are your keys to the game? What are you watching out for? What do you think will happen?
This is such a tough one, right? Because it's
Right?
like, how do you pick against Ohio State after what they did to Oregon? They took them to the woodshed. They
Yep.
were granted this was the second time they played this year, and that first one was really close. I mean, that was a Will Howard slide at the wrong time away
Yeah.
from them, possibly eking out the first one. Um, I know they've been injured on their offensive line all year, but they doesn't matter. Their depth is there. Their offense is prolific. Their defense is stout. Um, I think in terms of the keys to the game, it's going to be for both sides. So if you're looking at Texas, can like Mukuba shut down Jeremiah Smith? Because as much
Uh,
as Jeremiah Smith has been this like fantastic talent, we all dream that we have, we all salivate for him. There were times in the season where, he didn't really play much of a part. And then all of a sudden you watch him against Oregon, it's like, oh my God, it's a coming out party because
yeah.
they found out different ways of how to like
Utilize
is
them.
it hard for a five-star, like highest recruited wide receiver of the year to have a coming out party? I mean, he had Andre Johnson style numbers in the Rose Bowl. That's how
Yeah.
crazy of a game that was for him. So uh, Texas's secondary against the Ohio State receiving core of Ibuka and Jeremiah Smith, I think is going to be a big deal for
Yeah.
them. And at the same time, it's going to be Ohio State's run defense. They got exploited by Michigan. I'm thinking Texas is going to try to do something similar because every time they get away from the run, they don't look as strong. Every time they go back to it, they become this monster again. So I think those are the keys to the game.
Yeah. So I think here's the thing. I think there's two things. One, if the Cotton Bowl doesn't get filled with a ton of Buckeyes, I think Texas holds a really good chance at winning this game, mainly
Mhm.
because when you look at the Ohio State Oregon game, it was much closer, I think, because of the home field advantage for Oregon. When you put them at a neutral site, it was apples and oranges. It was a blowout. You couldn't even compare the two. So I do think that a home field advantage esque type of environment will definitely impact Ohio State. I also think Ohio State, what the difference between the first time they played Oregon, the second time they played Oregon, is they recognized that they couldn't play the smash mouth football that Brian Kelly likes or Chip Kelly likes to play. You know, Chip Kelly he loves to run. He's all about speed. That was his thing at Oregon, speed, speed. And I think, he was trying to be something he wasn't in both games that Ohio State has lost, right? So they wanted to try and out like tough Michigan, and that's not what they are. They're a finesse team. They're quick. They need to get it out quick, and that's how they beat Oregon. Was there just wasn't enough time to get to Will Howard. So it was like you just throw it to Jeremiah Smith really quick, and you let that kid do what he does best, which is ball out. That was to me, that was like, and I hate to keep talking about us, but it's like, I just always in this parallel universe thinking, man, what if Jeremiah Smith came to Miami? And it just, God, it kills me to see him like playing so well. Cause it's like the one that got away. And we're seeing that. And I think Chip Kelly is finally seeing that. I think because he was just so reliant on that run and relying on that O line that was already bruised and tattered, that to do these quick dink and dunks, to do these end arounds, now he's seeing what he has. And you couple that with Ibuka, like, what are you gonna do? Who do you cover? You know what I mean? Because there's only so many players on the field. And so again, I'm gonna lean Ohio State. I think Ohio State, but I wouldn't also be surprised if Texas was able to eke this out. I do not think this will be a blowout unless it's Ohio State. I think there could be a Ohio State blowout because Texas's defense has been very sketch. Very sketch. They let Clemson stay in the game. They let Arizona State come back in the game. I mean, even in the let's look at the last 3 games. You look at Georgia, you look at Clemson, and you look at Arizona State. All 3 games, those offenses weren't stellar offenses. They
No.
weren't these explosive offenses. And yet they stayed or almost beat Texas. Now you're coming up against a juggernaut in terms of a team that is just ready to fight. They have all sorts of firepower. What are you going to do? But there have been no break, and they've proven that they can hold a team. And Quinn Ewers, man, I mean, that guy in the fourth quarter, like, played good first 3 quarters, like, not bad. But then the fourth quarter, I mean, this guy was like, no, I mean, no wonder Manning is sitting on the bench. Like, that's the guy you want. So when you have that, and you again, I was alluding with the Penn State um, Notre Dame game, like when you have a great quarterback, it's very hard, to lose a game, unless your defense screws you up, like us. But I, I have to go with you and lean Ohio State as well. Give me a score prediction and give me what you think will transpire in the game.
Well, that's the thing. And I'm not leaning Ohio State.
Mm.
I think it's hard to pick against them. I think it's really hard to do it, but if I'm going with my heart here, I have to pick the lesser of the two evils, and that's what I did in both of these matchups. That's why, as a Miami fan, I'm going with Penn State over Notre Dame.
Okay.
And for my heart to rest a little easier, I would tolerate Texas and Penn State for a national championship game
Oh, I
over
love
Ohio
that.
State any
Oh,
day.
I would. Yeah. I mean, I am wholeheartedly cheering for Texas. I love Texas. I mean,
I'm
I don't know.
cheering for Jeremiah Smith and Texas. I want him to have like 300 receiving yards in a really close loss to Texas.
Yeah. I mean,
But
I mean, I won't lie to you. Selfishly, I would love to just watch Ohio State implode and then there be bitter infighting. And then Jeremiah Smith is just like, I'm out of here.
you want their defensive linemen fighting each other on the sideline like Marquise Lightfoot and Simeon
But
Barrow.
make it Ibuka, make it the 2 wide receivers. He's like, it's either him or me. You know what I mean? And it's just like, again, I know it's never going to happen, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think it'll either be a close game, it'll be a shootout / overtime. Even maybe I wouldn't even put it past them because Texas has played again. I'm not going to look at the season because we as veteran college football fans who have watched this sport year over year, we both know the team that plays in August is usually not the team that plays in December or January. You know what I mean? And what you really got to do is you got to go to the last 3-5 games. You know what I mean? And so I'm looking at what Texas has done. They're staying in all their games. And the funny thing is they show like they're the dominant team at the beginning of their games, but then there's this regress. So my hope is that Sark can get these guys, you know, in the positions they need to be in, but not let up. Because I think that's the thing with Texas is I think not so much with Georgia, but definitely with Clemson, definitely with Arizona State. They would get up, they would show a dominance to a certain extent, and then they'd be like, you know what, we got this. We don't need to show up. And then the other team would punch them in the mouth and be like, oh, we got to wake up. So I think with Ohio State, it'll be different because they know they're the underdog. They'll come out with the chip. Now I'm talking through this. I might actually go Texas too. I might go Texas, but I'm not. I'm not. I just like you said, man, it's impossible for me to pick against Ohio State. It's just
Yeah.
they're clicking. They're so freaking dominant.
Yeah.
I
My
mean,
pick is zero rationale. Zero. It's just literally just saying, this is what I want to see.
yeah. I mean,
However it happens, just make me happy.
yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna do a 2-part pick. So logic and reason say Ohio State and Ohio State big. I think it'll be probably a 2-touchdown game. I think not a full blowout because I think Texas will come back and show that they're competitive. I think it'll be somewhere in between like the I know they're both blowouts. I think it'll be somewhere in between the first Oregon game but with the result of the Tennessee game. And I know that sounds weird, but I think it'll look close, but then they'll just pull out and beat them. My heart tells me Texas in a close one. And here I'm going to make this storyline even better. Auburn is going to kick the winning field goal to put them in the championship and get retribution for all the crap people have been talking to him about for missing the 2 field goals against Arizona State.
Hey, let's not forget Ohio State's also the team that's known for missing a few field goals in the college football playoff. They're the one that missed that field goal as the ball dropped. Happy New Year, just like what, 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago against, what was that, TCU? No, it was Georgia. Georgia, they played Georgia. Yeah.
Um, so here's my last thing too on that. Selfishly, I want to see SEC fans start talking about how, oh, you see, there's still an SEC team in the national championship game. It just means more. Please tell me about how this traditional SEC team in Texas, who went from the Southwest Conference to the Big Eight to the Big 12,
We're going to
I
talk
still
about that in the
consider the Big 12
offseason
team.
because that's another topic I want to talk about is all these teams who won their conference championships, not traditional conference members, making it further in. We'll get into that. I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. Either way, the most interesting part about the CFP to me is that whoever wins out, it will be a first time championship winning coach. They'll
Yeah.
be winning the championship for the first time. Love seeing that. Love that being a part of the sport. Love it not being a traditional Georgia Alabama team in the finals. That's great. Hallelujah. But we shall see. Anything else, Rudy, we want to wrap up or talk about before we sign off?
No, I mean, it'll be great for Sark. I mean, I think, yeah, it'll be great for both. Ryan Day gets the monkey off his back of saying he can't
Yep.
win the big one and that he's got, he's on the hot seat after losing to Michigan. For Sark, I think it's more of like his story arc from like where he came from. Because remember, Steve Sarkisian has been a name that everyone's been talking
USC,
about in coaching circles.
Washington. Yeah, I
Right.
mean,
Right. Go back to that old photo of like Norm Chow and Steve Sarkisian, like together as an offensive coaching staff for Pete Carroll. Like, he's been around for so long and has always been like on the cusp of like, well, maybe he'll be a good head coach. And now he's, having that resurgence under Nick Saban, Alabama, being at Texas. I think it's great for him. And then everything that's going on over in Southern California right now, all the wildfires and all that with Sark's connection there. Like, I think it would be really nice to see him win.
yeah, Sark wins. I mean, James Franklin finally proven that, like, he can win the big games. I mean, Marcus Freeman, I think he'll be the youngest coach to win a national championship if he
I
wins.
take all the credit for Marcus Freeman. I was the one that did 11 players on the field, off the field. I did that against Jimmy Johnson in 1988. No one gives me any credit for it.
My favorite part was the presser between James Franklin and Marcus Freeman. And one of the first things, James Franklin brings up is, look at this guy's hairline. I'm like, Marcus, I feel you, bro. I'm like, it's like, let's not talk about our accolades. Let's talk about our hair. I get that a lot as well. It's the burden of having beautiful hair. You know what I mean? It is
Look,
what it
that's
is.
always on like on the stat sheet. It's like, well, what did great hair,
Great.
fantastic hair. Like, what was it? It
Five
was
star.
Pat McAfee was saying it the other day. Like, which player was he was talking to Sark like pregame. He's going, how are you gonna go after that guy in his humongous head? It's like literally like he's like they're doing the shot where like he's walking the field like hours before kickoff on College Game Day. I'm telling
Yeah.
you, like Texas played. Who did they play in the previous round of the playoff?
Arizona State.
That's why it was Cam Scatterbo. It was like, how are you going to beat
Scatterbo,
Cam
yeah.
Scatterbo and his enormous head that he has? He's been using that thing as a weapon all year. And you see Zark just like start laughing at it. He goes, yeah. So all these things are always part of it. I mean, Marcus Freeman's got the better hair of the two, obviously. Sark has the better hair in his matchup as well.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
Ryan Day
selfishly,
wears
I
that
would
hat
prefer.
for a reason.
Selfishly, I'm hoping it's Penn State, Texas, both teams win a national championship. It's great. I don't want to hear Notre Dame winning a championship, and I definitely don't want to hear Ohio State winning a championship. Those are just,
Just go to the coin toss and split it. Just be
yeah,
like, hey,
exactly.
we'll be
You get one, you get one. We'll just be like halfsies. We'll do this old AP thing. It'll be a throwback. We'll have co-champions. No one needs to play. Let's just end this. Go to next year.
Look,
Fantastic.
we're all looking out for our draft stock. Like let's let everyone go home happy. We're the champions.
Exactly. No one gets injured. Everyone's happy. Well, Rudy, another one in the books. Thank you everyone for watching to the end of this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think. Did we get it right? Did we get it wrong? What about Miami? Where are we going to go? Until then, win the weekend, y'all. Be good, stay safe, and remember, it's all about the U, baby. Go Canes.
Let's go find us a DC.
And a quarterback, please.
Yes.
We'll see you guys later.